The 17th chapter. I am the one with power. Why would I waste it struggling with my desires, when grasping them is far easier than stifling them? Deicide. The abyss had strung herself up like a hammock, and Deicide rested in her folds, swinging in the simulated breeze. High above was a beautiful canopy created by giant exotic trees. Warm artificial light needled through the gaps between the leaves and spilled onto the enormous stone slab where his children were being lectured by Iker, his Weaver chief commander. Everything known of the Weaver department was a mosaic of fabled misinformation and warped imaginings. The trim-bodied spies skulked around like ghostly felines. Their culture was very insular, to keep their training secret. It was even rumored that those that failed any portion of the school were killed, lest the embittered washouts expose them. Iker did nothing to confirm or deny the fanciful stories, as it kept out those who would certainly fail to meet Weaver standards. Deicide watched as his old mentors explained to his children how the laws of the universe only applied to the common. He was sure that soon their nannies would be complaining to him that the children were never around when they called, even though the children would be within earshot. Most of them would abandon many of Iker's stealth teachings after they learned the basics, but with their superior strength, they would have little use for clandestine activities themselves, but at least they would understand the tactics. All who descended from Deicide's official bloodline would live as deities among the very best of society, necessary to maintain the grip on the throat of his empire, which doubled in size each assessment cycle. Deicide rolled from the folds of the abyss and landed on the stone slab below, as her mass followed him in a black cascade toward the ground. She crashed around him, sending an oily flood towards the children. Iker stepped aside as the abyss washed over the children's feet. Deicide laughed as he watched them wade in the shifting black lake before they found their way to their feet. All of them had been fitted with a row of umbilical plugs down their spines. It downscaled the vestige enough to where it would not poison them, but they received a much greater percentage than the average eater for greater power. From the holes in the children's spines, a gray material emerged, the bastard vestiges of the abyss. Deicide spread his hands as the abyss flared. A horde of yellow eyes emerged from her surface. His oldest children, Silex and Kaisa, led the attack. Their veins shone a dark gray against their beige skin. The vestige material had formed itself into gray replicas. Deicide backpedaled and dodged the bites and slashes before running into Eldora, Acidus, and their own gray abyss clones. The rest of the children, barely out of their toddler years, huddled on the sidelines with Iker, while he growled words of encouragement. The children were capable of slaughtering more than the dregs of the deathless, but what looked like a savage battle to the civilians watching from the windows was nothing more than a playful father wrestling with his children. Even as the gray drones rushed him with bladed attacks, Deicide was in no danger. They may as well have tried stabbing him with sticks of butter. The drone's limbs gave a wet smack as they hit his heavily muscled physique, and none of his children could lay hands on him at all. Iker shook his head as another blitz failed. None of them would be ready for a battle against Ecocide and her sisters, even the mighty Eldora, who had already been touted as a prodigy of fighting. As they dragged themselves back to Iker, Deicide tried to console them, but they had inherited Not's perfectionism. He looked up and saw the eager face of an eater amongst his family. "What's up?" Deicide said, lifting the little gray-skinned amicus onto his shoulders. "Message from the Nazareth, sir," the eater said. Deicide nodded and handed off little amicus, holding back tears in his great yellow eyes, so much like his mother's. The tyke seemed to be jealous of his older siblings, growing at an accelerated rate. However, even he could not understand how special he was, the only child of Not and Deicide. He would inherit the seal if Deicide should ever fall. Despite all of the princes and princesses which Deicide had sired, Amicus was next in line, a fact that few people ever allowed to slip from their minds. Deicide made his way toward the war room. He was followed by his advisor Iker, Silex, and Kaisa, his two oldest children. Though Deicide could view the message anywhere, he knew a meeting would be necessary soon enough. He threw on a shirt as he walked into the wardroom, milling with his cabinet. He did not bother dressing in full uniform, as it was during the time of daily exercise. He crossed the room on the military side of the table. His children followed, but the rule did not apply to them yet. He dropped down in his chair, as Kaisa plopped down next to him, while Silex hopped onto the armrest. The teens had been very involved in the machinations of the Yolopile, political and all, but this was the first time they had accompanied their father in the war room. Before, they would only be allowed to sit silently next to the speaker, unseen, unheard. Deicide whirled his finger in the air at the aide running the presentation, and he quickly ran his fingers across a holographic touchscreen to begin the pre-recorded message. "Hey, puppy," Ecocide said. Deicide sneered as Ecocide's smiling face filled the wall display, her beige face surrounded by dark curly hair. He could still remember the coldness of her eyes, constantly betraying her otherwise friendly smile. She was reclined in the captain's chair on the bridge, amidst bored-looking officers and enlisted personnel on watch. "I just wanted to tell you, we picked up your girl. Fucked up how you left her out there all by herself. You never were that good with the ladies. Maybe that's why you stayed with that frown-faced witch. How is she, by the way?" "Nah, I don't really care. Anyway, Genocide says hi. Give she a kiss for me," Ecocide said before the message shut off. "What the hell was that?" someone said. Deicide turned back to the table, slunk down in his seat, fuming. He watched under his narrowed eyelids as the usual comedians prepared to lighten the mood, and then, as if through telepathy, they all held their tongues. Very few knew the exact relationship between Deicide and the genetic children of Bestat, one of his former mentors. As eaters, they were known collectively as the Lionesses, and their power was known to have been on par with Deicide's before he had become an adult. "Is it not obvious?" Deicide said. "They're goading us. Me." "What the hell do we care about one soldier?" someone said. "Shit, was she a spy?" someone said. Many began to murmur in agreement. Deicide threw his hands in the air at the incompetence that it was spreading throughout the room. "Why do I even pay you? You know she just wants to spin me up," Deicide said. Kaisa and Silex began to whisper to their father. "Address the cabinet like a big girl, Kaisa," Deicide said. "We believe it's a ruse to find our true location," Kaisa said. The cabinet began to whisper. "Dear girl, they already know where we are from the message," the general said. "One would assume so, but all they can garner is where we might have been, from our gates, and that information fades within seconds of its departure, so all they have is a guess," Silex said. "There could have been thousands of those message beacons," Hellmouth said. "I would bet that they're testing a device to pinpoint our location, perhaps even to predict it," Kaisa said, nodding to Silex, who nodded back. Deicide pursed his lips and nodded slowly, squeezing a laugh from the room. "So what do we do about this?" Deicide said. "I say we give them what they want," the general said. "What if they use eggshells?" someone said. "We can't be afraid of those," Deicide said, "and we shan't need them." "They exist for a reason, sir," someone said. Deicide shot from his seat and slammed his hands on the table. "Never! Only a coward would use such a weapon. Why do we train these people to fight? Why is it we endorse such ruthless competition?" Deicide said. "We have to look at the possibilities. When you all find one worthy of my attention, I'll review it," Deicide said, then streaked from the room. The Abyss and his children followed. Deicide returned to his office to fume. The usual line of people were waiting outside, but he ignored them all. Instead, Silex and Kaisa tended to them. Deicide burst in to find the rest of his family engaged in self-study, reading information from holographic screens and discussing weapon prototypes developed by the Somnus engineers. He collapsed into the chair behind his sleek desk as it emerged from the wall and ceiling. "Hey, Dad, look at this prototype," Capella said, sending a holographic image that rotated above the black surface embedded in his desk. "Why the hell are they designing cars at a time like this?" Deicide said, dismissing it after a glance. "You barely looked at it," Capella said, approaching his desk. She peeked under the holographic displays and waved. Then she came around the desk and held up her tablet. "I saw it. Why do you even care about cars? Every eater can outrun one," Deicide said. Capella clutched the pad to her chest. "But it looks so cool," Capella said. I'll be interested when they make something that can stop an eggshell without draining the abyss's power, Deicide said. Immediately his children and the queue all turned towards him. Something that isn't my face, Deicide said.